Good morning. We are going to discuss Rambam Hilchos Tefilah, Perek, Halacha Alef. Now, Rambam says there are 8 things that one who davens, hamispalel, tzarech hamispalel, lihizoher behen, v'la'asais. There are 8 things that the davener, the one who's davening, needs to be careful about, and he must do them. However, for some reason he couldn't, if it was very tight time or mistake, or he just didn't do it, it's not ma'akev, meaning your davening is so, because before he brought 5 things that are ma'akev, these are them. And the list includes some of the very basics: standing while davening Shemoneh Esrei, having in mind that you're facing the Beis Hamikdash, and other things. He gives a whole list, and bowing down at certain points, and then finally hishtachavoya. And he describes in the next halacha, halacha Yud Beis, Yud Gimmel, how do you do hishtachavoya? In other words, after going through all the others, he goes through hishtachavoya. After now, he had bowed down 5 times during the actual Shemoneh Esrei. So then he bows. Then after he gets up, he raises his head from the 5th bowing, which is at the end of Shemoneh Esrei, what we call Eisa Shalom. He sits down and he falls on his face. And he says all kinds of tachnunim that he wants. And then he goes to describe different halachas about bowing down. And now this is understood to be what we call Tachnun, Tefilah. Okay. Comes along Halacha Tesvav. He writes that minik poshut b'chol Yisrael, that we don't say Tachnun Tefilas Hapayim. Now here he gives a list of times, a very limited list compared to what we know, and that is Shabbos, Yantiv, Rosh Hashanah, Shechadoshim, Chanukah, Purim, and Mincha on Erev Shabbos, and Mincha on Erev Yom Tov. Then he speaks about the nighttime, but he says on Yom Kippur we do Tach. And every davening, why? Because it's a Yom Tchina Bakosha B'Tayim. Okay. But I want to discuss the origins of Tachnun, and there's a lot to speak about. But we're going to try to limit it only to the basic points and leave the rest for some other form. So the tour, Siman Kuf Lamed Alef writes, in the name of Tachnun Goyin, Tefilas Habayim B'tzibah Alpeim Achat Tefilah Rishos. It's not obligated. The documentation, which is the Ramah, right there, right? V'chein Herech B'tshuvas B'Sheshes, which is the Rivosh, who is at length describes how this is not a chiyuv, and this is only a minig, and brings rayas to that, as we'll see soon. And he says, and if he looks about it, shows Vilochein. That's the documentation. Kol Dina b'Minhageh Talya Milsa. All its halachas are just a minig. There's no real Shulchan Aruch for this. It's all minhagim. I want to add the Aruch HaShulchan after bringing this tour. Writes Vilochein B'Neikel. Therefore, it's very easy to not say Tachnun. But he adds that now that everybody has accepted it, it's like sort of like Meir Shavino like Chayva. He's not sure how much of a Chayva, but it's a Chayva. Okay. Now, this is, by the way, the guiding light of the attitude to Tachnun by most of the world. By a good part of the world, where Tachnun is a part of davening that's easily done away with. And it is based on this concept that it's a minig, it's not required, it's a rishus, and do it or don't do it, it's all good. Now, one of the proofs that are brought that it's a rishus is from a Gemara in Bava Metzia, an interesting Gemara. We know the story, there's a famous story about a big machlekes that happened between Rabbi Lezer and the Chachomim regarding a certain oven, Taner Shalach Noi, whether it was Tameh or not, and Rabbi Lezer stood his ground, eventually was excommunicated for that reason, stood his ground, and there was a long, long story of that. At the end of the story, the Gemara says that it happens to be that Rabbi Lezer was a brother-in-law of Rabbi Gamaliel. Al, his wife, whose name was Ema Sholem, was the sister of Rabbi Gamaliel. And listen to this story. She knew that her husband is powerful and can cause a lot of grief to Rabbi Gamaliel and his family due to the way he was treated. So, and where would that energy to create that grief come from? If he would say Tachnun. So every day she did whatever she can to avoid him from saying Tachnun. Now there was one day she thought it was Rosh Chodesh, but there was a mistake, so she didn't come to bother him. In other words, every day this is the understanding that some say, that she, and this is the way the Rivash understands it, she came to bother him, and she would interrupt him by talking to him, and so she messed up. I don't mean messed up, but she lost the day, and he did talk. Others say that what happened was a poor person came, stood by the door, she went to give him some bread, and then she turned around and her husband had done Tachnun. Immediately she said, "Stand up because you just killed my brother." Now, while she said that, the news went out that Rabbi Gamaliel died. Now the power of Tachnun, first of all. And now the question is, I mean, if she would have tried to stop him from davening Shemoneh Esrei, would she be able to? Of course not. He would tell her, no. Even if we go on to daven, or he would disregard her, as Halacha would probably tell him to do. So the fact that he didn't here indicates that it's a rishus, and it's amazing, and he didn't do it. However, the Beis Yosef disagrees with that approach, and he says that what happened here is as follows. And the Alter Rebbe brings the Shulchan Aruch that you're not allowed to talk between Shemoneh Esrei and Tachnun. The Alter Rebbe writes that you say it Lefi Minig, and the whole Iker Tefilah Abayim Hu Minig Shenagol Kol Yisrael Min Bais Olam. Wow, way back. It's not a Choy Vel Rishus. And therefore, he grows again, and you have to say it right after davening. But if you're mafsik and you got involved in other things, shuv ain't chinosay nishmas kolkach. It's not as powerful. So the Beis Yosef says that what she did, she didn't stop him from saying Tachnun. She interrupted him and made sure that he spoke about something else. She would find every day, I guess, some kind of a excuse to come talk to him at that time, and that would prevent him from his Tachnun being powerful enough to do damage, or to be successful, or to be powerful as he did. And then ultimately, those 2 days, that day, that didn't happen, and he was successful in destroying and killing and I mean, in causing the death of Ramabam. Okay, now bottom line is whether according to both opinions, it's a minig. According to all those opinions, it's a minig. Question is how powerful of a minig is. Is it somewhat of a chayva? Is it only rishus? But nevertheless, you got to treat it very, very high. Okay. Issue number one. Now let's talk about the days you don't say Tachnun. We'll do a quick run through. Shulchan Aruch brings a few things. One, you don't do it in a base oval, in a base achosin, and a shul that there's a mila, a bris mila, or when there's a chos in the shul. And the Ramah adds, obviously the chosin has to be there, and the mila has to be there. But if it's not there, and if it's another shul, you still say that. And he also adds that it's only a chosin on the day of his chosin. Whereas during the week, not, and therefore the Taz talks about I think it's the Taz. It says that it's not. He disagrees with that idea, but he says that because of that, a chosin should not go to shul on during the Sheva brachas because he's going to cause not to say Tachnun, although that's not our minig, but nevertheless. Then he goes and a list of days that you don't say Tachnun. Tesvav ba'av, Tesvav b'shvat, Chamishas b'shvat, Chamishas ba'av, b'shchedish. Now, then he writes V'lei b'mincha shalafano. And V'lei b'chanukah, v'yeshem v'gam b'mincha shalafano. The Chanukah also has mincha shalafano. So, and then he goes on, Chedesh Nisan, Tisha B'av, between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and then he adds them in parentheses, and not from beginning Rosh Chodesh till after Shavuos. Rosh Chodesh 7 till after Shavuos. The Levush adds Lag B'Omer. He says, why don't you say Tachnun all these days? Because they're days of Simcha. And he explains how everything is a Simcha. Now, why don't you say on Erev Rosh Chodesh, according by Mincha Rosh Chodesh? Because Allah is that if the Eidim came in Mincha L'mayla, that day would be considered a Chodesh already. So therefore, the Teresvi says that's what he means. However, the Pri Chodesh says that when he says Mincha L'Fanu, he means all Minchas of all days that you don't say that, which is, by the way, the way the Alter Rebbe brings, as we'll see soon. Now, the Alter Rebbe says Minig Svara about not saying Lam Natsayach, and then he goes on the days that you don't say Chedesh Nisan, Pesach Sheni, which hasn't been mentioned yet. Yudalit, Shuhu Yudalit beer, because some say it's also Tesvav, because actual eating of the Pesach Sheni was on the night of Tesvav. Lag B'Omer, and then the Alter Rebbe adds something that again is discussed a lot. Rosh Chodesh 7 ad Yud Beis Bay. V'ad B'chlal, those are the 5 days after Shul, because Chag Yesh Tashlim Kol Shul. And then he brings Chamishas B'Av, Erev Rosh Hashanah, Erev Yom Kippur, till the end of Tishrei, Tesvav B'Shvat, and then Mila Chosin, and he writes clearly, Chosin Kol Shivas Mamish. And then Tisha B'Av, Purim Cotton, Adarish, in Adarishon, Yudalit Tesvav Adarishon, Purim Gadol, Chanukah, Rosh Chodesh. And he writes, Gam B'Mincha, Rosh Chodesh, Erev Chanukah, Erev Purim, Gadol the cotton, Erev Lag B'Omer, Erev Tesvav B'Av, but on Erev Pesach Sheni, Neifle. Erev Pesach Sheni you do. Why? That we need to understand. Okay. And the Rebbe brings it in Hayomim. So, just a quick point. The point of all these days that you don't say Tachnun, the Shibel Aleket goes through and explains each and every one of the days, and then there's arguments. This is a massive discussion. Yeah, a massive discussion about that. So, yeah. Now, negate the Pesach Sheni. Just I want to bring that in. Pesach Sheni, the Pri Megadim writes that what the Pri Chodesh writes at Pesach Sheni, you don't say Tachnun. He says, why? Pesach Sheni is a private thing. A guy didn't bring a carbon on the first day. He brings, he says, what's that to do with everybody else? So I just mentioned that the Gemara in Psochim calls Pesach Sheni a regel b'fnei atzma. Now you could say that means that the carbon is a mitzvah b'fnei atzma, but the Rambam brings both mitzvah b'fnei atzma, and then he writes a regel b'fnei atzma. So the fact that it's called a regel indicates that it's a yom tiv. That the Alter Rebbe writes that you don't say say Tachnun. That on the mincha before you don't say Tachnun. So that why not? Why is it different than every other yantiv? So perhaps you can say that what makes it a regel is the chiyuv of bringing a carbon. So that doesn't happen until the day. It's not like it's a regel by itself. So you have to wait for the chiyuv. And why is it a regel? Because when you bring that carbon, it's zeichel yitzis b'tzayim. What do you mean? Pesach, the whole idea of Pesach is yitzis b'tzayim. If the carbon Pesach is yitzis b'tzayim, and the name of the Yom Tov is Chag Pesach, despite that the Pesach is only the first day, because that's the whole idea of the Pesach. Pesach Hashem al Botei Mitzrayim. So it can't affect the mincha before that, because it never came to chiyuv yet. So it didn't become a regel yet. All right. So that's just a point to make over here. I want to mention one more point regarding now it's not a regel. So the Eishel Avram says that it's still like the Rebbe says many times. It's lo'ad. It's the var lekeni yokem la'ilam chayim v'kayomim lo'ad. It's always still has the effect. Now there are other reasons why. By the way, why you don't say Tachnun on Pesach Sheni. The Rabbi Yankiv says because it's the day that the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Mon, still continued. That's when the taste of the Mon in the matzah ended. So it's like this is the effect of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And then he also wants to say perhaps, because if it were another Sheni, this would be the day to make Pesach. That would be a good day for Pesach. Another reason is because that's what prevented Haman from using Chedesh Iyar. Okay, because he said that it's a day of that the schus of the Pesach that they didn't want to do it. All right, and one more thing I want to mention is the Yemei HaMiluyim, which is an unbelievable sikh of the Rebbe. Yemei HaMiluyim l'cheiro. Again, many people don't keep this Yemei HaMiluyim. Why don't they keep it? Because what's Yemei HaMiluyim? A guy didn't bring his card. Say Yemei HaMiluyim. What does that have to do with Shavuos? What does it do with a Yom Tov? If him, it's a Yom Tov maybe, but what does it do with everybody else? And the Rebbe says, I'm meirid that the Rebbe says, as a hakira, how do we look at the Yemei HaMiluyim? Do we say that what makes it a Yom Tov is the carbon? Or do we say it's my Yom Tov because it's connected? Shavuos, we learn out Shavuos from the other Yom Tovim. They all have 7 days. Yom Tovim are 7 days. It's Shalosh Regalim are 7 days. Now, because it's 7 days, now you can make a carbon. The Rebbe says that Alter Rebbe Paskin is that for the 7 days, 5 days, if you don't say Tachnun. But one of those days is going to be Shabbos. What do you mean not saying Tachnun on Shabbos? Shabbos, you can't bring a carbon. So the word is that the days are holy. Oh, now we understand why you don't say Tachnun. Yeah. Okay, so those are the signs. I want to go back and just say that everything we've said here fits according to everybody, except the Rambam. And I want to suggest that the Rambam Shitta is not like that Tachnun is a chayva. Because Rambam brings it together with all the other things. Good. But the evidence, it's not ma'akir. But it's not a minik. There's no indication. Why don't you say Tachnun on certain days? So we know that there's a famous, you say that the Rebbe teaches us, and it's very powerful. The Rebbe says that, first of all, a day of a bar mitzvah. This is the most happiest day, biggest simcha. Person what's in the shama comes in finally, all the great things. But that's the day you say Tachnun. As the Tzemach Tzedek says, on a yahrzeit, on a great day, I can't. There's no greater day than to say Tachnun, to get Tchina, Bakosha, Tefilah, Slicha. So they ask, so why on certain days don't we say Tachnun? What are we taking away from a person, this great opportunity of Slicha and Tefilah that he can get through Tachnun? Why are we doing that? So obviously that concludes that that day itself accomplishes what Tachnun would accomplish. And that has to be shot according to the Rambam. Because otherwise, don't you say that? And that's why the Rambam limits it to just those special, really, really special days. And if you read the Rambam Yom Kippur, which is also a Yom Tov, it's one of the Mayadim, right? Eila Mayad Hashem. But it's a day of Tchina Bakosha Tainus. That's it. Then belongs Tachnun. The other days are obviously not Bakosha Tainus. You don't need Bakosha Tainus. All right. I just want to add one more thing. And this is already getting into not my territory, but it's the Zohar. The Beis Yosef brings the Zohar. I don't learn Zohar on my own. Beis Yosef brings the Zohar, and the Zohar says that the reason you say Tachnun is as follows. At night, you go to sleep, you give your neshama over to the Eibishter, right? And then when you wake up in the morning, the Eibishter gives it back to you. The process of davening, according to the Zohar, is that the Meshach HaTfilah, during the davening, you come to the point where you do a shtachavo, which means I am now being Meisa Nefesh to the Eibishter. I'm giving myself over totally to God. It's the ultimate giving over your neshama to the Eibishter. Which means going away from your personal self and going into the Eibishter's. Seeing yourself as an entity of God. Perhaps we know that Simcha accomplishes very often that concept of going out of yourself. It's get there. It's Simcha. I mean, there's a lot spoken about the Chassidus. So perhaps on days of Simcha, which the Alter Rebbe which the Rambam mentions only, those are days that you are in a state of Mesiras Nefesh on you. Okay, that's just my attempt at drush. Perhaps not a very good one, but that's what I would like to suggest. Anyway, like this stark, Hatzlocha, Rabba, Floga, and Zayt.